Fishing trips anywhere, anytime. FishingBooker.com.
Hey guys, this is Melissa Bachman. Are you ready to stop spooking deer before it's even time to hunt them? Then you need the new Flex S Dark cellular trail camera from SpyPoint. With a no-glow flash option, long-lasting solar power, and a ton of settings that can be changed anytime through the SpyPoint app, there are no more excuses for letting your deer get wise before the season even starts. So check it out for yourself and see why the SpyPoint Flex S Dark is the unstoppable and undetectable scouting tool you need for your next hunt.
Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, FishingBooker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, FishingBooker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. FishingBooker. Fishing trips made easy.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter podcast brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrains, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. Now, hopefully you were able to get some deals on all of the essential gear that you needed from Latitude, Genesis 3D, Huntworth through their 4th of July sales. Hopefully everybody has, kind of turned the corner and headed into whitetail mode. A little bit different over here because I'm getting ready for that bear hunt. And it's about a month away before I can start setting baits and stuff like that. But I'm going to start really looking in on some of that sort of stuff. So pretty excited about that. But this podcast, a good friend of mine, Tim Clark, really respect him as a hunter. Been doing it for a long time and has, some affiliations, but not a ton. So it's going to be a great conversation. He's had to outfit a few kiddos that are into hunting and killing deer now to go through kind of like gear, things that are overrated, things over the years, and kind of like if you were starting from zero or if you were an experienced hunter and, just trying to look for that one thing to upgrade. So really excited about this conversation. I think it's going to be a fun one, not going to be just like a regular gear, blah, 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 what's new type thing, but kind of deep dive into over the years, things that have worked, things that maybe we'll never use again, and kind of go from there. But yeah, so great dude. I'm really excited to have this conversation. And as always, thanks for listening. All right, everybody, Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And today, this isn't going to be like your normal gear talk about like what we're excited about or, new things from a company or anything like that. And, maybe there will be some of that. So maybe that'll come up. But I got Tim Clark here, and Tim's been on the podcast a bunch of times. He's a guy that I would consider a friend, maybe almost like a little bit of like a mentor. Like I look to Tim a lot of times, like to see like what he's doing with his kids. I think the first podcast we had was about Tim and bringing his kids into hunting and being in a tree with them. But he's someone who's done it for a long time, and I think he can speak to kind of like the way that gear has changed over the last, I was thinking about it the other day for myself. It's like 30 years plus that I've been bow hunting. So I had to think long and hard about who I could bring on to have this conversation. I think Tim is the perfect guy to do just that. So how you doing tonight, Tim?
Great, Adam. Thanks for having me on again. It's kind of cool. It's like coming back home. And man, that's a cool memory thinking about that first podcast we did. That's been quite a few years ago. And my kids were like your kids' age now, Now they're all like adult size, and it's not so much like bringing little ones along with me. But
right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you've been doing it that long. So the first thing I want to ask you is, what year was your first bow hunt?
You could have prepared me for that one. It probably was, well, the first deer I ever killed with a bow was in 96. And I know I hunted for probably, 3 or 4 years with a bow. Before that, without killing one. I wounded quite a few, but Yeah, the first one that I actually killed was October 10th, 1996. Sweet little button buck.
And I love the way that you led into that by saying that you wounded quite a few, just because that's kind of what I want to talk about. And I needed someone who I knew could kind of speak to some of this stuff. So maybe you don't remember your first hunt. I'll give you mine just as like a setup, because I want to know like the gear or like the equipment of the times. So I was using like an old PSE Sprint that I got out of the newspaper classifieds for $50. It was a choice between that one or a Bear Whitetail 2, which, if you know, has all the cables and all the things.
Yep.
I probably had a Meyer Thrifty Acre quiver. I was using 21/17s with either like a Meyer broadhead or a like Thunderhead or something out of my dad's box. And I was trying to remember the cost of the tree stand, but it was one of the steel chain-ons with a T-post in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was $35. And I had a two-piece, like a figure eight, inverted figure eight safety harness that went just around my belt and then around the tree. There was no bow hanger, bow rope. I don't know. It was probably just a piece of clothesline. And I remember the first time that I ever hunted, we put out a whole bunch of carrots on state land right up by my parents' cabin, not in the UP up in Baldwin. And I climbed up this pine tree with no straps on this stand, just with it in one hand, chained it on there, made a giant racket, no safety harness, no steps, no screw-ins, no nothing. Just climbed up the branches, hung this on there, broke a few branches off, climbed down, and then we went back out at dusk. And I had deer at 15 yards on the carrots, and it was too far. I thought, God, those deer are so far away. And this was, we were shooting at hay bales to practice at pie plate accuracy. I missed a deer straight down, like literally draw back, angle, and shoot straight down. And that was my first deer hunt and the equipment of the day. The attire, I could not tell you what I was wearing. I do know that for a long time I owned like a real tree, like not the tree bark, but the one that had like the green leaves on it. And it wasn't but it wasn't the fancy like AP one. It was just the original Advantage coverall, like single wall, like walls coverall.
Yep.
And that was my basis of equipment.
Man, that's a trip down memory lane right there. Well, I remember for me, my first bow that I killed anything with was, it was an old Darton USA. I don't even remember what model it was, but I bought it used from a friend of mine, and I couldn't even tell you the draw weight or anything. It was probably 45, 50 pounds, something like that. And I was shooting the double X75 arrows, big Lincoln logs, and I'm pretty sure I still have the same broadheads I was shooting in my little keepsake box there, my archery counter. And they were the Bear 2-blade with the bleeders in them. Man, I killed a lot of deer with those over the years, and just kept replacing the bleeder blades, and they kept on going. But like you say, no bow hanger. Aside from, I remember at one point I started using like the like hardware store bike hooks, hang your bike up in the rafters on that big yellow monster hook thing, and I would screw those into all the trees that I had built stands in. So before I bought tree stands, I was like a part-time carpenter, just building tree stands in all the trees around the neighborhood and stuff. Everywhere I had permission, I could hunt, and I'd go pick out a couple of trees. I loved the ones that were, the two trees side by side, build a little nest between them, and that was all I did for a few years, where it was just nail some boards on as your ladder and something to stand or sit on up top, and put out your carrot pile. And that was, that was living. It was good. But I mean, I had countless encounters like that where deer were right under me, just like what you're saying there. And yeah, I hit a few of them that way that did not turn out well. I killed quite a few that way too, but out of those tree stands and stuff. But really, by the time I actually started getting any equipment, I remember the first tree stand I ever bought was a old API aluminum. I think there was a Baby Grand. There was one that was a little bit smaller that had like a fold out seat. And I remember getting a deal on two of them, and I picked those up. Boy, I thought I was on top of the world. And it had that T-post that you screw into the tree, set that stand on it. That was great. And they were really light stands. I mean, they were way ahead of the industry for anything else. But I used those for a few years, and they were pretty much like permanent setups. I mean, that's one thing that's totally different about now. Everybody is, well, I shouldn't say everybody. It seems like a lot of people in our world are pretty mobile, tearing stuff down, setting it back up, tearing stuff down, setting it back up. But I remember setting those things up, and it was like, that's my spot, set the corn pile or the carrot pile, whatever out there, sugar beets. And that was bow hunting for a few years there. And then, that first one that I killed was just like that. It was right over a bait pile, come in close, and I had practiced and practiced and practiced. And it's funny you say, practicing shooting at hay bales, I don't even think about shooting hay bales anymore. I can't remember the last time I shot at a hay bale, but that's all we had back then. That's all I did. Hay bales and pumpkins. After Halloween, I'd shoot I'd put those out there, shoot them. But yeah, pie plate accuracy. And, the other thing, I was actually telling my boys about this the other day. Back then, we didn't have rangefinders. So you had to figure it out. You had to learn how to choose your distances and judge it. And I remember I shot all the time, and I'd take my whole quiver of arrows and I'd go stand by my target, and then I'd throw those arrows all over my parents' yard, just as far as I could throw them, in all sorts of different directions and angles and everything. And wherever they landed, that's where I'd walk up to them and shoot back at my target. And it just taught me to be able to guess my ranges. I couldn't throw them any farther than probably 20, 25 yards, but at least I had an idea of what I was doing. Gear has changed so much now, because I don't even know if I could do that anymore. I'm so comfortable just grabbing my rangefinder.
Well, and I think it's funny that you say that, because I think that's what I like about shooting the trad bow, and I'll do that. I'll do 100% still do that with trad bow.
Yep.
And it's that, I think it brings me back to that time. And I think people think about traditional archery as being buckskins and whatever, but it is to me just like being a kid again. So you said prior to that first deer, you hit a whole bunch of them, or a number of them. And I was trying to think, I've wounded my fair share, but it's not a ton. I missed a lot, and it may be that rangefinder thing that you're talking about, but I had some bad hits. I had some perfect hits. But do you think leading up to that, and even maybe up until today, as we get into the more modern stuff, at any point was there an equipment failure that you think that, had I done this, or had I had this piece of gear, I would have been able to recover those animals, or I would have?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is I had a release failure, and I was just too stubborn to hang it up. So I had a deer come in, I clipped my release on, and this was in the late 90s. So releases weren't what they are now, for sure. And I couldn't even tell you what brand it was. But when I clipped on, I went to draw, and halfway through it broke, and the catch on it actually flung right off of it. So it was absolutely broken, gone. And so my arrow kind of dove into the dirt. The deer ran off a little bit, but I was sitting right on the edge of a swamp and an oak ridge. So they came right back out. And as soon as they were right back feeding, I was like, well, I'm not going to give up this opportunity. I'm going to try to kill this thing. So I did something that I never practiced. I hadn't shot with my fingers since, shooting the trad bow and stuff, just when I was real young. And so I tried to shoot that darting with my fingertips, and it was bad. It was bad. Ended up gut shooting a deer, and there's nothing worse than that sound. And knowing there's no way you're finding that deer, zip it low and back. And yeah, so I want to say that was probably my first real experience with yeah, I know for sure that one is dead somewhere, but there's no way I'm finding it. That one hurt pretty good, but that was a byproduct of equipment failure and then my own stupid choice. But, before that, before I killed my first one with a bow, I had killed a few with a gun. So I had that experience pretty young, but, and I flung so many arrows, and I think it was probably right about that. It was right about 96 where I had hit enough deer that ran away, leaving sparse blood trails, knowing they were I'd hit them in the shoulder, that type of thing. And practice became a very real part of my summertime routine. And I had a couple buddies that were the same way. Everybody wanted to, up their game. So we had goals to shoot, 1,000 arrows before we got to October. It was just needed the practice. I did not like wounding them, and I still don't like wounding them, but it still happens. I mean, every once in a while, one slips through the cracks. I think it's a
Yeah.
reality that isn't talked about that much. Like, I mean, you don't want to glorify it, but man, it happens.
Yeah, with in going into this podcast and thinking about it and, having conversations with guys like companies and all sorts of things about broadheads. Like, to me, like, broadheads are like the best or the worst, and there is no middle ground. Like, it's the best broadhead in the world until it's the worst broadhead in the world, and then you'll never use it. And like, for me, like, one of the things I want to ask you is if there's like a product that you'll never use again, like off the table. And for me, it's the Schwacker broadheads. I've shot them at a lot of things. Most recently, a turkey, and it was shot placement. I think I hit it right on exactly on the wing butt. But because of the way that they open and how it works, I didn't get any penetration. That's what I'm telling them. I mean, I thought I smoked this turkey, but the arrow was sticking out of it and running at me and whatnot. But that was like the nail in the coffin, because I was like, I'm never going to shoot these at deer again, because, one of the cooler hunts that I've ever had, and it's just one of these ones where, it's how quickly things can change. It was like rainy day, like miserable hunt spot where I didn't know that Frank and Ernie said, hey, go up here, go over there, there's a creek or something, just find a spot. So I found a spot, nothing's going on, I'm sitting in the rain, it's miserable, and I'm basically I'm bored, and I'm grunting and bleating and grunting and bleating just incessantly. Like, because this is stupid. I'm just biding the time until it gets dark. Then here comes a parade of bucks right down this edge. And the bigger one was like this 9-point, turns and comes right to me. And I was at full draw waiting for him. And I should have shot him in the throat. And that's how I ended up shooting the big one in the throat, the head, the neck, whatever, however my memory serves. But that'll come into play later. And I didn't, because I was like, oh, that's not an ethical shot, but it was a very clear shot. So he turned broadside, took a couple steps, and I tried to fish one through there. And those little wings on the side of the Schwackers caught a branch. And it didn't just deflect. It was the most violent deflection that I've ever seen. My arrow broke into 3 pieces. My lighted knock with the fletching went right over the deer's back as he whirled and looked at me and bounded off. So really boring day turned into an exciting hunt. And then in my mind, it would have been way worse had I been using a thunderhead and I deflected and I did shoot him in the head or something, whatever. Guts, like you're saying. But like, to me, that was like unacceptable. Like, no more Schwackers ever. That's just, for me, there will never be another Schwacker in my quiver.
Yep. I think there's a couple of them for me. And one is, I shot Rage broadheads when they first came out for quite a while. And I killed quite a few, but I lost a handful of deer with those. And I don't know if quality control was getting worse and worse as time went on, but I decided at a certain point, I wasn't gonna go through it again. So I hung them up. I know they've advanced since back then. I mean, that was probably somewhere around 2010, 12, somewhere in that range was the last time I shot them. So who knows what they have now, but either way, I'm not willing to go back to them at this point. And then the other one that really surprised me was a tooth of the arrow. And I shot one deer that was like absolutely a perfect shot. It looked like it could not have been better. Right in the pocket, had to be a perfect heart shot. And that thing, the deer ran off and just kept on going. And I was on the edge of some pretty fairly open timber where it took off running, and I could see it going for hundreds of yards. And I was like, what in the world? How was that? And what I didn't like about that one, and I guess there's other brands that do this too, but it's more of about the size of it than what it was, the brand or anything. But it was just such a small, like, I just remember it couldn't have been, seemed like 3/4 of an inch wide. And it seemed like it was a field tip with a couple of small blades on it, just was super small. I was not impressed with the performance of that one. And we ended up finding that deer with a dog, but never a drop of blood. And it was like, yep, I'll never use that again. I like something that really opens them up and leaves some good evidence to follow. So, but broadheads, you're right. They're really one of those things where, like, you either love them or you hate them. And I'm generally not the type of person that wants to make a judgment off of one performance. Because you could take every single broadhead out there, and with poor placement, you're going to lose everything you shoot at. It's more about shot placement with most of them. So yeah, unless you had something with failures, mechanicals are always like a love-hate thing. Like your Schwackers. Through the years, I've shot so many different types of expandables, and some of them are great, some of them are terrible. A lot of them are marketing, just like anything. We could talk about any product that you want. go down the marketing route.
Well, yeah, and I think that's like the point. Like, so like tooth of the arrow. Like, if you were saying like tooth of the arrow, if you were just going by like one person's experience, for me, and I don't shoot them, and like they're really soft, and our friend Tom hates them because of that. But like I've shot 2 deer with them, and one I shot like perfect, like center punch the heart, went through and mangled the broadhead on the leg on the other side, leg bone on the other side, and the deer went 100 yards maybe. And then the second deer I shot right between the shoulder blades. Like it was one of those deals where, he was coming downwind of bedding. I had some scent out, nose down, turned, picked his head up, looked at me, put his head back down, and I put it right between the shoulder blades, and he went 30 yards and died right there. So by all accounts, you could say best broadheads ever. I could be the guy on the other side of that conversation saying tooth of the arrow are the greatest broadhead. Now, if you shoot basically anything through the center of the heart, like perfect, 4-blade through the heart, you're going to find that deer. It's a very bold statement, but I think it's pretty good. And I think at 11 yards, if you put one right between the shoulder blades, it's a pretty steep angle going right into the good stuff. And there's a spine there, and there's all sorts of arteries. Maybe, it's not what they teach you in hunter safety, but it is effective also. Not a lot of blood. I didn't get a lot of blood trail in that one. But when you watch them go down, when you could shoot them again where they're laying, that's pretty good too. But I think, that's the hard part. And you touched on like marketing. And I guess I will ask you, like, because of the time frame, right? So back in the coverall API days, double X75, you had to watch the videos. Maybe you saw some hunting on TV, or you were into outdoor life, Field and Stream, something like that, to get any real marketing. So for you, where did that change? Like, at what point did the marketing come into play?
Yeah. The stuff that sticks out to me was like back when outdoor television was basically on like TNN on Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, and you could watch like the Real Tree Monster Buck stuff and whatnot. You started seeing the marketing, for the camouflage was a big thing, and you figure out if you're going to be a Real Tree or a Mossy Oak guy. That was about the extent of it. But really, there was no online ordering. You could order out of catalogs or magazines and stuff, but a lot of the stuff was still storefront. It was, you go to Mill End or, Walls, wherever. You could pick up your, the things you needed, and it was pretty basic. It was for the early season, zip up hoodie and whatever camouflage they had. Shoot, I played a lot of paintball, so I was wearing like camouflage for that, and I just dual purposed it for hunting. There was not a whole lot of it, but then I remember. Do you remember the North American Hunting Club? Did you ever participate in any of that? So they were like, they had a magazine, they had a TV show. It was a hunting club that they're no longer in existence, but I was a lifetime member. I bought a lifetime membership, got a leather jacket and a monthly magazine, and it was really cool. But they had a magazine that had really good articles, and they did some marketing in that. So you would get stuff that would be, deer calls that, they would have partnerships with, Primos or whoever, and so that stuff started, pushing out, and there was always, you could order stuff, out of the back of it. There was always advertisements, but it really didn't kick into gear really until like the Outdoor Channel. I remember when outdoor TV became kind of like our news is, where it was like 24/7. Like you could pay for that subscription, and then next thing you know, you've got always at your fingertips TV shows and all of the marketing that went along with them. And I think that's when it really got to be like everything was commercialized. and there became things that were like, oh, I've got to get that new bow this year, or I've got to get that, bad boy buggy, or I've got to get that, you name it. Like there was all sorts of stuff that, everybody that was sponsored by anybody was peddling it, and yeah, then it kind of started the snowball of keeping up with everybody, and then as the internet became what it is through every stage of it, there's been all sorts of different, I guess, examples of where, marketing has kicked into gear, and some of it I think is good because there's an awareness of what's out there. But, I think a lot of guys now have like information overload, like we never had that years ago. It was just, you got what you needed so you could go out in the woods and stay warm and kill things. And you never had to ask everybody that you knew, hey, what's the best this? What's the best that? Like there was none of that. It was just, is this effective?
Well, and I think the difference there is like you say like you asked your buddies or you ask everybody that you know, but I think that the world was a lot smaller then. Like, and I think I see it like with, Frank, Ernie, John, like those guys had the same. I mean, Frank and Ernie have like the same everything. So you and your hunting buddies all had the same thing. And if one guy didn't, like, God forbid he lost a deer because it's like, I told you not to use those stupid broadheads, da, 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 da. Like, and so that's everybody kind of had the same thing. And now, you have the option to put it on Facebook and say, hey, what's the best this? And like the door is blown open for everything. And that to me, was like a blessing and a curse. But what I want to ask you is, I was just looking at my notes. So is there anything that has been consistent, like almost from day one? Because I want to know, like, one thing that you feel is like the most underrated piece of gear and the most overrated piece of gear. But I think the underrated one might be something that has stuck around that long. It's like stood the test of time.
Man, trying to think what's
one thing you'd never give up? Like, if you were going to start over, what would you start with? Like, I have to have this every time I go into the woods.
Well, for bow hunting, I guess the thing for me is sharp broadheads. From day one, I remember, there was always the call to make sure your equipment is sharp and effective. Make sure that you can do everything you can with that. So that to me is like the first thing that I do when I'm preparing for season. I'm always like, oh, I got to start sharpening broadheads. It's almost getting to be fall, So that's one thing. But as far as like what I take in the tree with me, like paramount every time, I don't ever remember once I started hunting out of actual tree stands not having a safety rope. And so that's always been for me like super critical. I don't know what it is, but I've always had this fear of like being by myself back in the woods, something goes wrong, falling out of a tree. So that's always been like, even though it started off pretty rudimentary with those belts that were just around your waist and stuff, but and then like the hunter safety system came out and that was a whole lot better. But being tied off in a tree has always been real important and a big part of my gear that I don't go out without it.
Now, did you do that even in a climber?
Yes, I did.
Because that is one thing where that, like, the argument for lots of the guys who've been doing it for a long time is like, I'm in a climber, I'm not going to fall out of this thing. Like,
have you ever fallen out of one?
I have not, but I have twice lost the bottom section. I've been trapped in one, but I've not fallen out of one.
Yeah. So I've lost the bottom of one once. That's not fun. But I leaned against mine while I was up at the top getting ready to set it. You put the strap around. I had a Summit Viper, right? So you put the cinch strap around it and tighten it up, and then it's kind of held in place. Well, before you have that tightened up, it's kind of prone to wander. I leaned against that, and I remember just in an instant, I was halfway around the tree. I was tied off, but I don't think I even got my tether tight. Because I hugged the tree as I went around, but it freaked me out enough that I don't know. I've heard that same argument for years. I don't need a safety harness. I'm in a climber. I can't fall out of this. But I always advanced my tether up the tree with my climber because you're climbing a limbless tree with those things anyways. So to me, I was like, why not advance the rope?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one of those things that I don't know. It's always been important enough piece of gear for me. Next to my bow and all that, but I mean, you're never going to go without that. But.
So then what do you think is the most overrated, overhyped,
Yeah, the best stuff, the lightest, the most compact, the most expensive, pick your descriptor there, because, you know, this is one of the things that through the years here in this last, what, 7, 8 years since really the mobile hunting thing became as popular as it is, there's this race to the lightest, most compact, best equipment out there. And it's awesome. I'm 100% for it. But where I think a lot of guys get hung up on it is feeling like you've got to have that to be effective, where, you can go to Menards or Meijer or Walmart, whatever, go to the hunting section, go to the sporting goods section, and if they've got a set of climbing sticks and a tree stand, you can use it. It doesn't have to be, $400. You can go spend, $50 on a clearance set of climbing sticks, take them out, set them up, be effective with it, and, playing a game that you can afford. There's a lot of guys that probably shouldn't be trying to afford some of the gear that that we all are, and that to me is just fiscal responsibility. That translates to any aspect of life in my world. And that's probably just my age showing, but it's one of those things that's like, you don't have to have the most expensive, best, lightest, most compact setup if you can't afford it, or if you don't know if you're going to like it. I think it's a great idea for people to start with something that you got to almost struggle a little bit with it, so you learn to appreciate it when you get the good stuff. That's what I'm teaching my boys. You'll like this. So my wife and I have had this conversation because, my boys, they hunt with me quite a bit, and they get a lot of hand-me-down stuff. And I've got a lot of nice stuff. Through the years, I've accumulated a lot of really good equipment. But man, there's times where I'll be like, I don't want to give them my hand-me-down stuff because it's still really good. And I want them to struggle for a little bit so that they come to like really respect the value in good quality, comfortable, lightweight stuff. And my wife's always like, remember what you started worrying? She's like, when we first got married, you didn't have any of this stuff, and you hunted all the time and you were happy as could be, like, you're very right. So we're doing that same thing for them.
So is there one thing that you've like bought or tried and you said, nope, not for me, never again, like overrated?
Ooh.
And I will be 100% 180 with you on this too.
Yeah. So I don't know if I could say 100% never again, but the one sticking.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I thought that was going to be your like go-to.
Yep. I can do it. I've done it. I like it, but it just doesn't fit my style, largely due to the fact that I'm almost always in a tree with one of my kids. And so one sticking just doesn't make sense. I carry multiple sticks. We climb the same set, so that works really well. But, this goes right ties in beautifully with that last thing, where it's like so many guys may have never even climbed a tree with a mobile setup at all and immediately go straight into one sticking and learning how to climb with ropes, ascenders, belay devices. I mean, stuff that if you've never done any rock climbing, you have no experience with it, you've never done any of that technical stuff, and now you're going to try to go do that in the dark, climbing a tree, to me, I feel like that is as good of a product, and, it's a good method. It really is. Man, it's a advanced thing, and I think it gets way overhyped by a lot of people. There's a lot of guys that do it well. And I think you look at a guy like Greg Staggs, that guy, phenomenal teacher, knows his stuff. He's got a wealth of information out there to teach guys how to do it. And there's a handful of other guys that are really good at, teaching all that stuff. I don't know. To me, it's a lot of extra stuff for somebody that may have never done anything like that. I just feel like a lot of that is more than you need. Complicated anyways.
If nobody's ever like met Tim Clark in person, he uses one of the long Attitude dump pouches as a sleeping bag. That's about how big he is, really. So it's huge that he would say that one sticking isn't for him, because he's done seminars on him. I've watched him do it. I've seen him carry his stuff into the woods. And I just want to know, like, from like a realistic standpoint, because we've had this conversation before, just like about climbers, like going from climbers to all the way to like one sticking, and you've pulled back a little bit from that, it would seem. But what is like with your one sticking setup, like if you were to go like all day sit Ohio one sticking setup, like what is your pack weight approximately?
Ooh, I don't think I ever carry with food and water and everything more than about maybe 15 pounds. Yeah. And, I carry unnecessary things too. When I do a pack dump, there's generally more snacks than I need, and there's always a spare release, and usually a couple of grunt calls. And, if I'm in Ohio, that's usually what I'm doing. It's going to be near the rut, and camera equipment, basic stuff, a camera arm, lightweight sub 1 camera arm, but it's pretty light generally. But like with my climbing sticks, I use the tethered ones. And so I carry 3 of them and aiders. I have a movable aider. So it's really light. Probably the heaviest thing on my pack is the Predator platform. And that's what, 3 pounds? So so really not a lot of weight. For the most part, I never even really worry about what's on my back walking in and out. There's not a lot of weight there.
Well, that's the thing, is like I'm just trying to like quantify like where we're at with this. And that's why I'm saying, like, Tim's not a very big guy. He's using, 3 sticks and some aiders, and it's not that heavy. And I think that I don't understand like the one sticking thing, because it's like they're just trying to remove some weight, I guess, because I feel like I've climbed a tree just about every way that you can. And I guess I've never used the lineman spikes, but I don't know why, even like watching people do it who know what they're doing, like watching Tim do it, like watching Austin do it, watching videos on it. And I'm just like, it doesn't do anything for me. And like, I'm a larger guy who can carry more weight, but the weight difference doesn't really even line up there. So why do you think that people are like, why do you think it's so hyped? Is it just because it's so different, like so outside of the box? And it's because there isn't, the craziest thing about the whole thing is there isn't, in this multitude of companies, right? So if you want to say Cruiser, Latitude, Tethered, Trophy Line, out on the limb that makes like one-off stuff, basically, it's almost like made to order, is the only one that's making a true one stick. So there isn't marketing out there saying like, you have to buy our product, this is the best product. Why is it such a thing?
Yeah, I think it stems largely from the culture that we have. We've all generated this culture of trying to innovate, right? And it's been such a cool thing to watch. And I think that's sort of where it's coming from. But, years ago, I remember I spent a whole lot of time on like the Saddle Hunter forum, back before there was Facebook groups and all that stuff. And that was one of the things that everybody was always doing, was trying to come up with new, innovative ways to climb a tree. That's where things like the nader and the swader came from, and the, climbing with those wild edge steps with those things. And there was always this evolution of what's the next thing that is going to get us up the tree better, faster, however that was going to go. And there just wasn't there wasn't companies that were producing things. So people were making stuff, there weren't platforms. So people were making platforms by butchering, old tree stands, even new tree stands. And when somebody decided, hey, we're going to put a platform on a stick, and now you have your climbing method, you have your platform, and all you've got to do is have yourself a long enough rope that you can keep advancing that up, climb up the tree. Now your climbing rope becomes your tether. It becomes what you descend on. You don't need to have a lineman's belt for it. You just, use that. I think it was one of those, we can mix and match and, make a product that will do all these things. But in the meantime, I think at the same time as all that's happening, other companies were better climbing sticks, so you didn't have to butcher old climbing sticks for that, old Lone Wolves and Hawk sticks that were all, the 30 and 36-inch sticks that we all cut down to 20 and 22. And, companies started producing them. Okay, there goes one thing that you've got to do, but people still keep, making things. And I think that just started a culture of, hey, we we can innovate we can make our own stuff. And as cool as it is, I have no idea how one sticking became as popular as it is. I mean, I get it that, your sticks and your platform, you have one stick, one platform. It's very small and compact, especially some of the new ones. I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you've seen, all the new stuff. There's some really nice, lightweight, packed one sticks. But yeah, it has evolved into something that there's like a cult following behind it,
Without
And
marketing. I mean,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that happens. It's got to be kind of that, again, we're talking in an echo chamber in a niche market where, we've all been to the Mobile Hunter Expo, to all those shows. We've all spent time on the same, Facebook groups all over. And you see that stuff pop up all the time on there. So, if it appeals to you, go for it. It's a safe way to climb. It's great. But, one of the big detractors for me, I guess maybe I just haven't been marketed to enough for it. But the biggest thing is like, I like to do everything the same way from the beginning of season to the end of season. And, when you get into late season and you're dealing with cold fingers and, all the cold weather, heavy gear and everything, I don't feel like I want to be hanging upside down, pulling a stick up and moving it. I just like to hang my stick, climb up it, hang my stick, climb up. And pretty basic. I've been doing it for 100 years, so why not keep doing it, right? So
no, absolutely, absolutely. I'm super surprised that was like your pride never again. So let's talk about this, right? I don't know. I was expecting, maybe like a climber or something like that. Like, maybe something, because the last time that I used a climb, like I guess it's my dad's old climber. Maybe, I don't think it's one of my old ones, but it's up at our cabin in the UP. And we were hanging some feeders, deer feeders, and trying to figure out, because I had to get it up like 16, 18 feet because of the chain and the barrel and everything, keep it out of the reach of the bears. And, it was a mess trying to do it with the ladder. And I was like, well, there's this old climber up here. I can just do it. And it was the hug the tree kind of climber. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I am so much too old for this method. And even, I want to say it was like maybe the first year after starting saddle hunting, I went back to a climber. And it wasn't a good, it wasn't a bad climber, but it wasn't like my lone wolf or anything like that. It was like my more like a summit, but it was the 2-piece loggy bayou, like,
oh yeah,
sit and climb. And I climbed up with that. And it was just so cumbersome. Like, I just did not enjoy the process anymore. So, something like that. I just thought it would be like something like that, or like you had a bad experience with climb, this climbing. I mean, for a guy like you, a 36-inch lone wolf climbing stick is trouble going through the woods. Like,
yeah, it was.
So
it was.
There could have been any number of things there, but so you've got a couple of, like, 3 boys, right?
Yes,
and that you have set up to go hunting and all of this stuff. So what I want to do is like go through from like starting from like a budget, like the best budget type setup that you would use, like from boots, clothing, climbing, like tree stand, like setup. And we'll just pretend that it's mobile in today's world, kind of like bow setup, broadheads, like whatever. Then we'll go to like their next upgrade, and then kind of like where we're at today with like, not like money's no object, but like some of the better products out there, like in over the years.
Right. Yeah. So starting with clothes, the biggest thing that I do is off-season clearance sales. And so with the kids grow through everything before they ever like wear them out.
Well, this doesn't just have to be like kids. I'm saying like just for anybody. I'm just saying you've had to do it. So
I have, yeah. Over and over again. So I scour clearance sales, whether I'm in brick and mortar stores or online. And I love finding stuff that way because most of the time it's just as good of gear as you're going to find anywhere else, I try to stay away from the name brand stuff, setting the boys up. Like when they get to the point where they want to start buying their, more expensive stuff, have at it. Once they have jobs and they can do that, that'll be on them. But for now, the best they get from me is you can always find stuff in the clearance section on ScentLock's website. And I'm not a ScentLock nut, but man, they have some great deals on their clearance stuff a lot of the time. So I'll watch that all year long. Go into that, and if they have stuff that's closing out, they're changing styles, whatever, you can get full early season, mid season, late season setups pretty cheap. The other thing is I don't try to go brand specific with anything. Like if we're at Walmart and I see they've got, hey, there's camouflage long sleeve t-shirts. Those would be great for October, gonna get a handful of them for the boys. I don't spend a lot of money on that stuff because it's not gonna last. They're either gonna move on to something else, gonna use it a few times, outgrow it, whatever. But you don't have to spend a lot of money. Camouflage isn't that important. And deer definitely don't care what brand you're wearing. So, but I do have some nice stuff. Don't get me wrong. I like to buy higher quality stuff, and almost everything I wear is either merino or some sort of performance synthetic stuff stuff that's moisture wicking and lightweight and layers well and stuff like that. For hunting in October in Michigan, by and large, you're going to have some pretty nice weather. I don't go overboard. Good camouflage hoodie, like shoot, that Huntworth set that I've got. I mean, yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with, those guys have sales all the time. You can pick up a hoodie and a pair of pants pretty cheap, and that's really all you need. And boots, same type of thing. You don't need to be buying Hanwogs or Crispies or, for your first time boots. If you're going to be doing a bunch of hiking, if you're going to be in Southern Ohio in the mountains and you're going to need something for some good support and stuff, you're going to need some nicer boots. Most of the time we hunt around swamps here. And so I wait for sales on, muck boots, lacrosse, whatever the sales are at Northwoods or wherever. And, I don't know. I try not to spend a ton of money on that type of stuff just because, number one, it gets expensive outfitting a whole family, with nice stuff. But number two, like when you go out and you use your nice stuff that you spent a whole bunch of money on, it takes some of the joy out of it because you're always worried. At least I'm always worried about the nice stuff getting ruined. So I don't feel bad putting them I put them in $100 pair of boots, and I'm happy as can be. I don't need to spend $300 on a pair of boots for them.
See, I've destroyed everything that I've ever owned, like my whole life. Like I don't know if you're the same way, but ever since I can remember, and like I was 11, 12 years old, like buying my own school clothes and whatnot. And whatever I would have, but I never like prioritize like nice stuff over regular stuff. Meaning I would have my brand new clothes on and I would go play in the dirt and ruin them or whatever. And still to this day, I'll be in like work clothes or nice shoes, nice pants, but I have X amount of time. So I'm still going to go check the trail camera and be in my work pants and rubber boots or whatever. So I lack that. Like, I just know that it's going to get ruined. And that's why I love, when I don't really say, I don't say it like in jest. I say like, if you want me to like test something or whatever, like I'm going to put it through like some serious paces because I'm not going to like be like, oh, I can only use this on this section. But what I was going to say about those, when you were talking about boots, is like for anybody who's like looking for boots right now on the clearance, like because of whatever's happening with Gore-Tex fabric in California, like they had some of those Hanwogs, the same ones that I have, that the price actually went up on them. But they were like $110. I sent them to my brother and I was like, look, and I have a brand new pair of Crispies right down there that Matt, got to give a shout out to Matt. He always sends like the deals and your birthday month and all this stuff from Midway. I have a brand new pair of crispy Nevadas over there that I got for $110. So I was like, I don't really need them, but I will.
Yep.
So
case in point, that's exactly what I do. If I find something on clearance like that, totally capitalize on it, because it's not like you're going to outgrow them,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I do
I'm
the
done.
same thing for myself, but for the boys, man, I'm so much more budget minded, and I'll pick stuff up and get it for them for Christmas or their birthdays or whatever, and try to outfit them that way. But man, it's not so much the clothing, but the gear that gets expensive. The saddles, the climbing sticks, the platforms, even with discounts and stuff that I've been fortunate enough to get through the years. There's a pretty good expense to all that stuff.
So I know that I had said, right, I figured that you were going to say like a climber, but I think in that situation, like if I was a guy just starting out and I wanted to be mobile, I would be on Facebook Marketplace and I would buy a climber. I think,
Oh, man,
how many deer have been killed mobily out of a climber since the since the Baker pattern came out?
Yeah, probably more than could be counted. A lot of them. And the strange thing for me is, as much as I loved having a climber, and I thought I was pretty mobile with my climber, I don't think I could go back to one, just because where I tend to set up anymore, there's no way you'd ever get a climber in anything, almost anywhere where I hunt, aside from, some of the places in Ohio in the hills. There's been some places where I've been climbing up a tree with my saddle and going, man, if I had a climber, this would be great right here, but most of the places around home and, in the swamps and stuff, I set myself up in some pretty gnarly trees, angled trees and clusters of trees and stuff like that. It'd be hard to get a climber in some of that stuff anymore, but yeah.
But I think, like, let's say that you had like a $500 budget for everything, like we're talking like straight away, like we're talking, if you were just like, I think I want to get into this, but I don't have anything. Like, I think I sold my last two climbers for I think I sold one of them for $25 and the other one for like 50, just because they were in the way. And I don't know, and again, like from that, like appreciation standpoint, like if you never lugged around that big ass cumbersome Summit Goliath or like the API or, we thought we were super slick with the Loggy Bayous. Like the first two that I hunted out of were hug the tree, fold the seat up.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were flat to your back, hunted with a fanny pack, and that was it. Then go to the two-piece that sticks way off. And then if you're familiar with Loggy Bayous, they got those big bands. You can appreciate like the loadable sit and climb, the ones that actually fold flat, like that new XOP that just came out that, 15 pounds. I'd love to see a real world review on that, because that's, a reincarnation of the, what's just a hand climber, I guess it was. But I think if I were, I would echo like everything that you said, other than I killed my biggest buck in Michigan with a legit, like, wear to church gray merino sweater that came from Goodwill. And that was, and I think I might have had like some of like the brown polypros, like from the Marines. The puffy ones that if you put in the dryer, they get all distorted, and they're like really small and have super long arms or like whatever, like those ones.
Yeah. Goodwill is a great place to find stuff. Yeah.
And then for a bow, I think you could have like any 3-year-old bow is going to be far superior to anything that we have. I think Whisker Biscuit, I think rests for 70% of hunters are overrated.
Yeah, you're probably right. Right. For what
how
most
many
of us
deer
are
were
doing.
Killed off of a flipper or the 2-prong Cobra. Eek, that one.
Oh yeah, yeah. Remember having to change those little tips out on that every year, and oh yeah, yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. Matter of fact, that's what I started all my boys off with, was the Whisker Biscuits, and they've used those until they started shooting the S3DA, doing the tournament shooting and stuff. So then we got some better equipment, but Whisker Biscuit, simple sight. You can pretty much get the cheapest Walmart sight, throw it on there, and it's going to be 100 times better than the stuff that you and I started with, that we were happy to use.
I don't know. So that I'll argue that I think that any of those sights are going to be fine, but I can tell you though, the single 1 or 2 brass pin aluminum plate bolted to the side of your bow was bulletproof. Like I didn't worry one bit that I was going to step on it and anything was going to happen to it. Now, the one that came on that Bear Paradigm, I'm sure is some sort of polymer or whatever, but man, it just looks like, the first thing that I would look at and say, nope, got to upgrade.
Oh yeah. Got to upgrade, but it's still effective,
But yeah, I mean, I suppose
it's kind of one of those things that's like, does it have enough value to replace? I don't know. I've gone through so many of the kid bows that I didn't start putting nice sights on them for the boys until they were all right. I know they're gonna keep bow hunting, But yeah.
And so now, middle of the road. What do you think? Okay, what was your like first like real nice upgrade where you were like, whether it was clothing or boots, or you were like, man, I'm in the middle of the road here. Like I got my own money. This is the one thing that's gonna be it for me.
And I remember buying my first brand new bow, and I was sick of shooting used and hand-me-down stuff. And so I remember being like, I've got $850 that I've saved up for a bow. And this was back in the late 90s. That was a lot of money for a bow, but that was to fully outfit the thing. And I remember being like, all right, this is where I'm going to park all this money. And I went in and got everything exactly the way I wanted it, and had a 3-inch overdraw. Remember the overdraws? There's a word you don't hear on the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast very often. But I mean, it was a Martin Jaguar with the overdraw and all the brand new arrows, brand new matching quiver, made everything matched all my camo, did everything that year. And I remember that being like, I had gotten out of all the just ragtag, whatever I could piece together I bought everything to match. But that was, that was a big deal back then. Now I've gone through the whole gamut of buying nice stuff, selling nice stuff, buying other nice stuff, and now it's like the stuff that I won't even think about compromising on anymore are things that I've got to use constantly. So climbing sticks, platform, my saddle, like I'm not compromising on that stuff because that's the stuff that lets me do what I want to do, how I want to do it, and I don't focus so much anymore on the bow because it could be any brand. It could be any, like that's all necessary stuff, but the stuff that gets like you say, the abuse constantly. Yeah, I like my stuff to be dialed in for that. I don't change it up a lot anymore.
So for me, the first thing that I bought that I was like, this is something, was I bought a HHA optimizer, like one of the original ones, not with the wheel, but with the thumb screw that went up and down.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And it was like over $200, and I think it was like on sale for like $150. And I was like, man, this thing is so expensive, but I was like, I gotta have it. And then I was like, but then you had to like, the wheel system I feel like is like the best, easiest way to set up anything. But that one, you just had to figure it out. Like you just had to make your own like little white tape and then line it up to one of theirs. And it maybe was still 0 and 60, or 20 and 60 or whatever. But that was the first iteration. And then the second iteration was like when I'm getting really into it, as I bought that Lone Wolf sit and climb. And I was like, and that was, I think, secondhand. I paid $400 for it, or $450, and
wow.
it was like, that was a big, I was like, man, this is nuts. Cause when they first came out, I'm hunting out of a, Loggy Bayou at the time. I think I paid like $189 for it, something like that.
Yeah.
And that was coming from a $35 Meyer stand, right? So that was, we're incrementally going up. And then so like for 10 times, more than 10 times the amount of that first tree stand. But I think for that like middle of the road, like if I was going to switch from a climber, like I already had been hunting out of a climber, and I was going to be like, okay, where can I move up? Like, what's the next spot? Again, I think I would go to Facebook Marketplace and I would look for Lone Wolf Assault and some climbing sticks. and you're those, I think those tree stands on there, I see them often, like around my area for $125, I think is about like the going rate.
Yep.
And then I don't see climbing sticks on there very, very often, but I think a pack of like 3, like the last couple times I've seen them is like $75 for a pack of like the original for $200. And like go online, like look around and see what $200 gets you. I think that is probably the best value for like not a $20 or $50 climber, right?
Right. I think marketplace is the place to go if you're trying to find stuff that's just you can get good used stuff locally, and a lot of the time, like if you're buying from somebody, like for instance, if I was putting something on there and somebody was going to come and buy something, you're going to get some information from them too. Some sort of idea how to use it. So I don't know. I don't know if I would go if I'd point somebody towards a climber or a hang on tree stand as much as I would a saddle, just because for me, the shift from tree stands to a saddle was really where, like, as far as how I hunt, that was the biggest paradigm shift for me. So I still tend to lean towards that. And if you can find a good used setup, because you can get like a set of hawk sticks cheap. Those go on sale all the time, even like Muddy Pros, and there's tons of different types of sticks that you can buy cheap.
All right. So walk me through like the most safe and effective, like the cheapest, like the most budget friendly, safe and effective complete saddle kit. Because like I said, I'm just walking up here from a $50 climber, like at the full bottom of the budget end. And in the middle, I'm fairly confident for less than $250, I could get what used to be the standard for the mobile hunter that didn't use a climber. What is that price point? That's why I'm going the way that I'm going.
Yeah, I get you. I don't know.
$200 might not get you ropes.
Yeah, $200 is going to be, you can, depending on who you're buying them from, you're going to want somebody that cycles through them quite a bit and isn't worried about, getting all their money back out of stuff. Yeah, you'd have a hard time with a $200 budget to get into a saddle.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, I just saw there, like literally on the marketplace. I spent a lot of time on marketplace, but there was a $700 saddle kit that was all Latitude stuff. Now, granted, it did have knee pads and it had a Doyle's attached to it, so there was some added value items there. But $700 is a big pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And then there was a beast stand with beast sticks that was $900 on there, and I was like, and I always look to see, like, do I know these people? Like, am I? Like,
yeah, you probably do.
Am I familiar with these guys? But I was like, man, that is like. That's why, like, and you've done it, like working at the shows, like to try to have like a conversation about like, well, what does it cost? What's everything here cost? It's like, well, it's about $1,000, $700 to $1,000. And, that's a real like super commitment. So like, what do you think it costs to put together a kit on the budget end, on the low end?
If you're buying used stuff, you're probably going to have $150 into a saddle. I've seen them $100, but
well, you can buy the Maverick was on sale for $135. I mean, so
yeah, you're not wrong there. I think there's plenty of good sales that you could shop and get into some, get your saddle, your ropes. Again, ropes are expensive, especially if you're buying the premium ones. But, by the time you have ropes and you're going to have a platform, most of those. I mean,
you're
there was actually
$150.
There were some pretty good sales. I don't know if you saw any of the sales that were going on this 4th of July weekend, but there was some that were like $70, $75 for platform. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It was phenomenal. I was like, man, that's hard to believe. So, I mean, if you can shop around and get those sales like that, you might be able to. You might be able to get into the $400 or $500 range by the time you have a set of climbing sticks and everything else that you need. But again, you go back to that either a basic climber or a basic hang on with a set of sticks, your limitations are going to be a little bit different depending on, how motivated you are to carry bigger, bulkier stuff into the woods. But I mean, a lot of guys did it for a lot of years, so it can be done. So you're probably right. You could save a whole lot of money going the less popular route. I don't know that I would do it coming from where I'm at, but a guy could buy a pretty decent setup for,
I completely agree. It's just, I'm just simply looking at it and saying, like, how many deer, and I would venture to say, like, how many people in the South are still hunting from climbers, where it's all the pine trees, and that's just the way that it is. And then standing sticks. I mean, again, go back to your tooth of the arrow. I mean, the world's greatest bow hunter, Andre DeQuisto, he only hunts out of standing sticks. So, like, it's all Dan in fault. Standing sticks. I mean, you're
pretty darn effective,
right? So it's maybe just one guy's opinion, two guys' opinions, but it's the only way to do it. So you can't argue the fact that it's effective, and you just have to get in there. So, I mean, I was trying to be unbiased, Tim. Come on.
Good job.
And so, like, obviously then when you get, I think of that setup, I would upgrade my mobile setup. I think at that medium level, I would still don't really care about a whisker biscuit. That's still fine. But I would probably upgrade the sight. For gear, I think the layering system, I think that's been the one thing over the years that I feel like a guy like yourself, or there's lots of other guys out there who I feel like I could take and throw into anywhere, any situation, right? And I could give you a climber, I could give you a stand and sticks, give you your setup, and throw you out there, and you could come back with a deer. But if I gave you crappy clothing, or subpar, if I gave you cotton everything and you were just miserable, that would be the biggest detriment. You'd be like, I can hunt out this climber all day long, but being soaking wet and freezing and bulky or whatever, looking like the kid from, A Christmas Story, it's not going to fly. And personally, just a little bit higher quality base layers and then some sort of waterproofing on the outside has changed everything in my ability to enjoy hunting, I think.
100% agree. Yeah. That's the number one thing for me. Once I started getting into proper layering systems where I can wear what I need to wear walking in, carrying my extra layers in my pack or strapped to my pack, and being able to, put them on, take them off, do what I need to, with them being lightweight, not too bulky. That stuff wasn't even a thought years ago, and now it's everything. And you're right, I wouldn't go back to wearing cotton everything. That'd be a really tough pill to swallow.
And I was thinking about that. One of the things I think I missed, that I kind of glossed over, was one thing for myself that I wouldn't go to the woods without is a puffy. I feel like you can get, and again, I think my favorite one that I have is an Eddie Bauer one that I paid $17 for or something, and it's green, and it folds up to the size of a Nalgene bottle, and just to put it in the bottom of my pack. And when you say when I do a pack dump and there's just something that's always in there, I got extra this, I got extra that, I always have that in the bottom of there. And I even a lot of times after the first time that I've worn it, I don't ever put it back in the stuff sack, or I just jam it in there and everything else can go around it. I'm not even concerned about it. I just know that it's in there. And if I need it, I'll grab it.
Yep. I do the same thing. I love that. I mean, to me, it's just cheap insurance, and it's light. You're not paying a weight penalty for it. And what it provides in insulation, invaluable. So same thing. I keep a puffy. I don't do the puffy pants. I don't find myself being cold on the legs, but I always have the puffy jacket. So
yeah, I've only ever heard Tom Taylor talk about, Alex from Latitude, he wears the King's Camel ones, and he can't have anything but good things to say about them. They're his one of his favorite things. But I've heard Tom talk about the stuff from First Light. And my brother and I hunted one year and it was super freaking cold. And he's like, yeah, you can wear these. Well, I just wore them in and I destroyed because they're like thinner than paper. They're like made of like silk material.
They're super thin.
And they were like shredded, like absolutely destroyed by the time I got to the tree. And I felt so bad, but
they're not
lesson
durable.
learned.
Warm, but not durable. Yep. That goes back to your destroying everything.
Yeah, because it's like I'm not thinking about it. I'm thinking about like I don't want to wear in my and I don't know. I am not the guy. Like I hear people talk about it all the time about, well, I go in and I have all my stuff in my pack and then I'll just walk in my underwear and then I'll get dressed at the tree. Like I'm trying to get to, once I get to the tree, I want to be up it as quick as possible. Like I do not spend any time, like I spend zero additional time at the base of the tree. And I would say 90% of the time, I have no idea which tree that is. So, I've spent the last 15 minutes within 100 yards of this tree because I'll get there and I'll look and you're looking for the tree and then you move up 10 feet and you look at this tree and you look at that tree and then you go over here and you go over there. And then I've spent way too much time on the ground right there anyways. So I'm up the tree, but everything in my pack is like that because I'm generally wearing a vest. I'll have the puffy in there. And then if it's cold, I'll have another jacket of some sort. But I'm not taking the time to take my pants off, put on some puffy pants to do any of that stuff.
You got to learn how to get dressed up in the tree.
So I shit you not, Tim. I was in Missouri and it was -8 and I was wearing rubber boots and my toes were absolutely freezing and I was 20 foot up in a tree. And that was when I was still on that 4-inch top stick platform, taking my boots off and putting hot hands in my boots up in the tree where I can do it. But that was a time where I was like, that was going to be the worst failure ever if I dropped that boot, because then I was going to have to climb down really hard climbing sticks with cold feet in my socks. Everything was going to be bad if I dropped that boot, but I didn't. But it was stupid because it was too cold for the hand warmers to even work anyway, so it was wasted energy.
Bummer.
That wasn't as big of a bummer as another lesson learned that day is I made ramen noodles ahead of time and I put them in my thermos. I thought it was going to be great because I was just looking forward, so excited for the juice. And it turned into one big giant noodle blob in there. And there was like a thimbleful of warm juice in there. That was very disappointing. It wasn't nasty, but it was just, I was so excited for warm chicken soup, basically. Yeah, I should have just made broth. I should have left the noodles completely out of there. So note to self.
Yeah, that's good to know. I've never tried that yet. So,
well, yeah.
Yeah, now I know.
That's what I'm here for. I'll test it out for you. But yeah, so is there anything like for you that's the high dollar, right? So now you're lap of luxury, you've killed all these deer, world is your oyster, but this is the one expensive luxury that you've afforded yourself in hunting that now is maybe you didn't know how you ever lived without it, but it's something that you really enjoy.
Oh man, probably the latest thing I've spent a bunch of money on that I do enjoy. I don't use it all the time, but when I do, I really enjoy it is my e-bike. That has just been, it's been great for covering a lot of ground and, saving a lot of time. It's made me way more efficient. I use it probably more scouting than I do hunting. Man, I like that thing. It was, it's an expensive purchase and not something that I think, most everybody's going to be affording, but that's a good one. That one to me has been a lot of value and a lot of fun, and being able to I've been fortunate enough to get 2 of them now, and so I can take one of the boys with me, and I mean it makes it fun. It's been definitely not a necessity, but it is a nice piece of my gear that I appreciate these days.
Now give us what's the use case on that? Like, so when you're packing up to go scouting, or when you're and I'm not talking about at your house where, and I'm not saying that that's not that's not good enough. But I'm just saying, like when you're going out to go somewhere else, like what is your thought process of saying, like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to bring my bike because it's going to let me do.
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of the time there'll be trails. There's almost always some sort of trail in most of the places that I hunt. So trail systems, whether they're ORV trails, horse trails, walking trails, mountain bike trails, you can usually find some sort that'll get you from like a parking lot area, and you can park there, hop on the bike, and cover 3/4 of what you need to cover before you get to, where you want to start scouting or start hunting. And what used to take me 45 minutes to an hour worth of walking, I can cut that down to 5 minutes on the bike. So in that, saving myself that hour on each end, and then I'm actually where I want to be. That's, to me, it's invaluable, especially when I'm doing, like, if I go out in an evening, I get out of work and I can hop in the truck and go and get out, do a little bit of scouting, put out a couple of cameras. I can actually be where I want to do those things without wasting a whole bunch of time, walking on trails, So I do that quite a bit. And, the hardest part of it is trying to figure out where it's illegal to do that. Like there's places where you just can't do it. It's posted and you can't. And so there's some places that I like to hunt, but I can't even take my e-bike. So it's not like it's useful everywhere, but there are some places where I can take it. And so I'll cover a lot of ground on it. Places where I don't want to drive my truck in. It might be 2 tracks that you could take a Jeep down or something, but I don't want to scratch up my truck going way back in, through mud holes and all sorts of stuff. So I'll ride the bike, and it covers a lot of ground really effectively. And then that thing is phenomenal for hauling deer out. I've got a cart that goes behind it, and that has saved me so much, being able to, well, shoot, we use that cart, that deer that I shot at the Patreon hunt there a couple years ago, pulling it up out of that bottom of that pothole we were in. And, it's just as simple as can be. You pull it up out of there and hook it up to the bike and go,
So where do you put, and this is obviously there's more marketing behind e-bikes, but like e-bikes and one sticking, because I feel like it's like those are two of the things that are, I guess maybe it is like echo chamber or whatever, but it's like those things where they're like the most talked about.
Yeah, you're not wrong. There's plenty of marketing around it. Again, it's a nicety. I don't think it's a necessity. It's just one of those, it's like having a nice bass boat. Well, you could probably take your 14-foot aluminum and go, rip some bass off the beds, pretty easy, but, you get a nice one. And, it's just one of those things that I think the more you do stuff, the more time and effort you invest into something, nicer your equipment tends to become. To a certain extent, you start going, I do this enough. I'm going to upgrade to something that, makes my life a little easier on, to some extent, or is more efficient, or, you name it, whatever. But that to me has been where I've been like, you know what, I can afford it, and it makes my life a little easier, and it's fun. So I'll do it, But if I couldn't, it wouldn't keep me from killing deer, It is definitely not a necessity for my hunting kit.
Sure. Well, I mean, I thought you were going to say like that $80,000 sparkly Skeeter bass boat will get you there a lot quicker than
it will.
But yeah, Tim, I'm glad that we could sit down and kind of go through some of this stuff, and like we could, maybe take a little bit of a trip down memory lane for you there and talk about the XX75s and all that. When is your moose hunt? I see that you got the moose shirt on. Yeah, I know you got a moose hunt coming up. So
I just got this. We went up to Banff, did a family vacation to Canada, and I had to get a moose shirt because I'm going to go kill one with my bow in September. So my buddy John and I are going to go up, and it's just going to be the two of us in Northern Ontario flying in, and going to be doing some like shoreline style moose hunting. So we're getting everything set up for that. I think we leave, 26th of September, and we'll be back probably just days before the Patreon hunt. So if everything goes well, I'll be rolling into camp there with a moose skull and a bunch of meat to share.
Yeah, your trophy room's going to look a lot different this year.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be bringing the trophy room this year. That was pretty fun.
Yeah. So I'm excited to hear about it. What, just real quick, like what kind of preparation have you done for this hunt that is different than any other like out of state hunt that you've been?
Yeah, it's so strange because flying in and being up there, there's no bow shop close, there's no extra equipment available anywhere. So we're trying to prepare ourselves to be able to like shoot each other's bows. We're fortunate we have the same draw lengths. So we're gonna be shooting the exact same setup, same arrows, same broadheads. So we've been working on that, getting everything basically built, set up for that. I played around with about a dozen different builds, trying to find the right weight that we'd both be comfortable with. The outfitter says they want to be able to have us shoot as far as like 70 yards. So kind of think like tack style, for the most part, John and I are whitetail hunters. We're real comfortable in that, 30 yards and in range, and I'm much more comfortable than he is at longer ranges because I have done so much target shooting and tack stuff. And so I'm pretty comfortable shooting longer ranges, but he's not. So we've been working real hard trying to get it where we're dialed in, where we've got all the clearance we need. We've had to do some peep adjustments, changing knock points and stuff. We both have different styles. So trying to get everything set up so that, at 70 yards, when you spin that dial, you've actually got clearance for your broadhead and your vanes and everything. And so we've been just doing some bow work, got his all paper tuned the other day. And other than that, I really haven't bought any new gear. I do have to get another pair of like tall rubber boots, just to get a backup pair. But, like you say, earlier it was like, I've got all the clothing I should possibly need, all the layers. I've got lightweight and heavyweight rain gear because we'll probably it'll be rainy, I'd imagine, at some point. So, but for the most part, it's going to be pack up a bag full of, the typical traveling hunting clothes. The bows and the arrow setups will be a little bit different, but and try to make it so we can, if one of our pieces of equipment fails, we can have a good backup with each other's stuff. And I do have one more bow that if I get around to it, I'll possibly set that up as a backup for the backup, but I'm not real certain it's necessary.
Awesome.
Other than that, it's just practice, just like we all should be doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about it. It sounds like a great trip. Moose has never been anything that's really been on my radar, so I'm really excited for you to hear about it because I've had a bunch of guys that are like, you gotta go hunt moose and da 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 da. And so maybe it'll spark a fire in me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
but I appreciate it.
I've always wanted to do, so I'm happy to be finally going.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Tim. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. Always great to talk to you.
Yep, likewise. Good to talk to you.
Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
Outdoors isn't just a place, it's a lifestyle. Experience the action and unforgettable stories with Silver Kings, Sundays at 8 a.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV, wherever adventure takes you. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.